All right, everyone. How are we all doing this evening? I can see some people have just joined us, and I'm just going to make sure I don't get any feedback from the YouTube channel. There we go. All right. Well, welcome everyone to our event this evening with Erin Kinsley and Felicia Yap. I'm CJ Cook, and I'm very pleased to be in discussion with both Erin and Felicia. We're not joined by Harriet Tice today. Sadly, she can't be with us, but there was a giveaway on Twitter earlier for one of her novels. So apologies if you didn't see that or if you've come expecting to see Harriet, but we'll still have an excellent conversation, I think. A few little housekeeping things. We have, as you hopefully can see, a chat box and a Q&A box. Feel free to ask questions. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, so everybody can have an opportunity to ask a question. But for now, let me introduce our two authors this evening. So Felicia Yap grew up in Kuala Lumpur. She has written for The Economist and Business Times. She has also been a radioactive cell biologist, a war historian, university lecturer, a technology journalist, a theatre critic, a flea market trader, and a catwalk model. So quite the bio, Felicia. Felicia lives in London and is a graduate of the Faber Academy's novel writing programme. Her debut thriller, Yesterday, was published by Headline and in multiple other languages around the world. And her second book that we're going to discuss this evening is Future Perfect, and that was it just released this month?
Yes, 18th of March.
Okay, last month. Okay, excellent. Okay, well, thank you. So we'll be pleased to hear about from you, Felicia. Okay, and Erin Kinsley. Oh, where is my? Sorry, Erin. My bio for you has just vanished off the screen. Erin Kinsley is a crime fiction writer who also writes under a pseudonym. Are we able to find out what that pseudonym is, Erin?
Well, actually, yeah, the pseudonym is Erin Kinsley, and I originally wrote as Anne Zarudi, and I wrote a series of novels about a Greek detective that had a kind of a mystical element to me, a bit of mythology and whatever. So Erin Kinsley is very contemporary and very different for me. So I can't match Felicia's fabulous biography. I think it's better if we just kind of keep my biography to one side, because it's in no way comparable to Felicia's very impressive list of life achievements.
Well, I have questions for Felicia. Lots of questions, so we'll come back to that. So, but yes, so Erin, you were brought up in Yorkshire and you currently reside in East Anglia, and you're a full-time author now of crime thrillers. So the novel that we're sort of going to focus on this evening is Missing, in which a mother of two named Alice walks into the sea and never comes back. So it has a really extraordinary premise, and both novels do, and I'm excited to chat to you both about them. Can I, starting with you, Felicia, can I just ask you a little bit about the premise for this novel, for Future Perfect? It's very high concept. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the idea for this book? And yeah, let's start with that. I was going to say it's execution, but that's quite a big question. Can we start with the genesis of the book?
Of course. So the idea for the book actually came to me on a catwalk, because I used to do some modeling in the past on runways. Just before I stepped onto the runway many years ago, a backstage helper handed me a really heavy handbag just seconds before I was about to go on. And I remember thinking to myself as I walked down the runway, what if someone had put a bomb inside this bag and, we are all going to die? Would I have led my life a little bit differently today had I known we would, that today would be my last day? So many years later, I sat down and wrote the beginning of what would eventually become Future Perfect. And you may recognize that precise scene in chapter 0 of the book. So the concept was, of course, a big question which preoccupied me for the 2 years which I spent writing the novel. But then I realized that concepts are merely empty canvases to hang stories on. And what really matters when one is telling a story are the small details. They are what make the story sparkle. So the challenge was really to find details to populate this novel and make it real to the reader.
Sorry, it's a terrible mistake to mute yourself and then forget about it. I think that's really interesting what you said about the sort of idea being a canvas, because I think so often people think that you have an idea and that's it. Everything's sort of, realized and then the novel's basically written. So I think that's something really, really interesting we might come back to, because you said it took you 2 years to write as well. So that's quite an interesting process.
Yes, I've realized that small details are very much like pretty sequins, exquisite diamantes on a dress.
Yeah,
because the book is set in
yeah.
the world of fashion. I can't help but introduce a fashion analogy, and really, it's like a sequin, a diamante. They're what make dresses shine and sparkle, and these very details make stories shine too.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Wow. On a catwalk as well. Not many people can say that. Erin, what about you? What about this book, Missing? I mean, I know that your books have similar themes in terms of crime and domestic settings, but what was it about this book, do you think, that, or what was the idea for this book that sparked this story?
Actually, family secrets, that's what I'm really interested in. I'm intrigued by programs like Long Lost Family, and those kind of programs. I absolutely love them. They're kind of a guilty pleasure for me. But I think there's some fascinating family dramas hidden behind those programs. And I'm particularly interested in the new train that they've started with those, which is to do with DNA testing. And the drama that's an unexpected result from a DNA test. You think you're just going to go on ancestry.com and develop your family tree, and something very unexpected comes back from that. And it was that idea that gave me the idea for Missing. But I'm trying with my books. I try and be a little bit different. There are crime novels, definitely, but my main focus is. Of course, there's the crime is solved. There's an investigator and the crime is solved. But my main interest is the effect of crime on the people involved, on the family, and how the crime changes them. My first book found the crime was almost solved, kind of a third of the way through, and then it was the recovery of the boy who'd been kidnapped that became the central focus of that. So for me, it's all about family secrets. This, the title of this webinar is perfect for me because it's all about secrets and the secrets that families keep.
I like the idea there that, you're right about when you try and find family or maybe do a DNA test, and maybe there's this assumption that things are kind of rosy from that point, but they can become very, very complicated. That's so interesting. I'd be very keen to hear a little bit more then about how that developed into the story. But just, I mean, on that note, thinking about what you said earlier, Felicia, about this canvas, about having this original idea and the details, I wonder if I might ask about process. And this was your second novel, whereas this is your fifth. Is that correct, Erin?
Well, under my other name as well, it's actually my 11th. So
wow.
I kind of should have it down by now.
I certainly can't match that.
I think that's a nice comparison. I think, I mean, have you found that over the course of those 11 books, your process has changed, or is there something that you've retained from the beginning?
I think it's changed a great deal, actually, as I've got a bit older. The time of day that I write has changed, and the way that I work has changed. And I think I definitely find it much easier. It's something that because I know how things are supposed to fit together, and I have a lot more confidence that everything's going to be okay in the end. Even if I go a bit off piste and things are not quite working out, which I think always happens. I think that happens with every novel that you write. I'm confident now that I can bring it back on track, and I think that's something that comes with experience. It's just it's a craft that you're learning after all.
I remember
that it gets easier, I must say, Erin.
I think it's a relief to most novelists to hear it gets easier, maybe like parenting. But I remember Anne Enright saying something I can never recall verbatim, but she said every novel breaks down. There's a point at which every novel is broken during the process of writing it, and that has stayed with me because it brought comfort in those early stages when you're still really an apprentice. I think it's not like you're working with a team of writers, you're just writing by yourself, and so you think, oh my gosh, this is just me, this novel must be thrown in the bin, but maybe that's just part of the process actually, and you've maybe found that.
Yes, I think every writer goes through the stage of thinking that this is total crap and it should be bin. For me, I've realized that it's better not to have a process and to seize each day as it comes. And because I travel a lot, I write in very many different places. I've become more attuned to what each place actually brings to the writing of a book. So to give you some examples, whenever I write in Germany, I'm a little bit more structured. And Germany is particularly good for introducing sort of a level of structure to novels, to plots. While Italy is more about character development, going the flow and seeing, what secrets your characters may come up with, or what secrets they may reveal to you as the writer. So I've learned to capitalize on these writing opportunities, which each place can offer me. And that's what I've realized in recent years, is that there's no one place that is perfect. It's all about making the best out of what each place can offer.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. So you're in Germany part of the year then?
Well, for Future Perfect, I actually wrote quite a bit of it in Italy and bits and bobs in Germany and Switzerland. But the bulk of it was sort of conceived in Britain. Well, actually, Britain's really good for coming up with high concepts, by the way. But when I had to work with my characters, I found Italy to be a great place for it.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of research abroad as well for my novels. Do you find that, Erin, at all, that you go away to research?
To be honest, no. I mean, I'm going to say the exact opposite to Felicia now, because I like to have my one special place where I write, because it's kind of like a comforting place. I have everything that I need there, and it's as if my brain switches to writing mode when I go into my little house there. It's time to write, and it's as if the rest of the world switches off. I have everything I need. I have my special pens and my notebooks, and it just feels like a cocoon. And that's where I do all my writing. I do very little writing away from home. I need complete silence. I can't bear any kind of interruption. We're lucky we live in the countryside. So I'm kind of the total opposite to Felicia, but I'm not writing high concept. So perhaps that's the difference, I guess.
I think the challenge for all writers is to find something that works for each of us personally. So and there's no one fit all solution. It's about finding what works for each of us.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because you said, Erin, that you have changed slightly how you write as you got older.
I used to be really gung-ho. I used to get up at 5 a.m. When my son was small, I used to set the alarm for 2 a.m. and work for 2 hours between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. to write. So I have very little patience with anyone who says I don't have time to write, because even when I had a toddler and no sleep, I was just still super motivated to write. I couldn't do that now. I don't have the energy. That's so amazing. Now I start sort of 8 o'clock in the morning now and have a more normal, a bit more leisured kind of structure to the day. But I have done those crazy hours, just to get the words on paper. Sometimes in your life, that's what you have to do.
You do, yeah. I don't know that I could function, like my brain would not function at that time. I'd need some sort of strong caffeinated drink. But yeah, that's really inspirational, and it is, suppose, when you're motivated, when you're determined and you've got obstacles, you find just whatever is going to enable you to do that.
Yeah, you have to find something that works. If you want to work on the craft, you've got to find something that works for you, and you have to make sacrifices. And I think at certain times in your life, that sacrifice has got to be sleep, hasn't it? That's just the way it is.
Did kind of just to follow up on that, did you have book contracts then, or were you still kind of just a beginning writer?
That was just very much a beginning writer, and I was just having a bit of good feedback. I was getting asked by agents to send a whole book, and I was just really on the edge of my breakthrough, and that I think was motivating too. I think if I'd been getting a lot of knockbacks, I probably would have wasted a couple of years and settled down at home. But I was just on the cusp, and so that was a big motivation, of course.
But you just you had that little glimpse of an opportunity, so you really went at it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And Felicia, what about you? Can I ask about you the beginning? Because I know that you've had all these amazing careers, and obviously that must have fed through into your writing. I mean, you were inspired on a catwalk, so it is sort of tied in there. Have you? I'll ask first about those experiences and that kind of line of those different paths you've walked. Is that all fed in then to these books?
Absolutely. My motto as a writer is nothing is ever wasted. So every single life experience, be it small or seemingly insignificant at the time, does eventually come back to feed in your writing or haunt you in some way.
Yeah.
And most of the time, it's the small details that matter, going back to what I said. So, snippets of conversations one could have overheard in a science lab. I used to work in a science lab, or small observations made in war diaries, because I used to read lots of war diaries, having worked on the Second World War as a research historian. So all these little details come back to you eventually. Even my previous career writing for the science section of The Economist has paradoxically proved very useful, because in my novels, I tend to populate them with spoof science articles. And the experience of having written lots of science articles in the past actually has been incredibly useful in novel writing. And it's something I would have never expected when I previously was a scientist. So I think it's all about embracing life and what it has to offer. And the other thing which is useful is the five senses. I think every single path you've trodden, every single smell you've had, it all comes back to your writing and kind of makes it more lively, and hopefully to the reader too.
I wonder, would you be able to tell us a little bit about Future Perfect? I know that there is a historical side to this, so that presumably your previous research experience has fed into that. Is that right? Because there's a war element, isn't there? Or am I mistaken in that?
Not for this book, no.
Yesterday.
What was really useful for my first book, Yesterday, because Yesterday is set in a world where everyone has limited memory. So most people only remember 1 or 2 days. So when a murder happens, everyone struggles to remember. That includes the detective, the victim, the perpetrator of the crime. So what I found useful while writing that book was all the war diaries which I had read, because they merely reiterated this discovery that when people write about the same event and try to remember the same thing, more often than not, we remember the same thing completely differently, depending on who we were with or what we were doing at the time. So that realization really fed into my first novel, Yesterday, because it helped me write about a event from the perspective of different people in a more nuanced way, I hope. So it and also just trying to understand what memory is like many years later, how memories are often filtered by time. That's incredibly useful for writing a book about people who can't remember.
Yeah. It's I think memory is fascinating, and obviously you've got that sort of scientific background as well, so that must have fed in there as well. I wonder, can you, Erin, tell us a little bit about this book, the storyline? We've thought about the sort of origins of it, but can you tell us what's special about it to you?
I think because it is so intensely family oriented, I'm as I get older, I'm more, like I say, I'm more interested in relationships than anything else. It's set in a little town in Cornwall called Selmouth, and a woman, Alice, one day on a crowded beach walks out into the sea and basically doesn't come back. She drowns. And her daughters, who have been estranged for some time, she has 2 daughters, and one of them comes back from South America. The sisters are reunited over their mother's death, but they have those sibling tensions that we all have in our families. The sisters, they're very different personalities. Lily doesn't want to believe that her mother would commit suicide. Marietta is more pragmatic. But for Christmas, Marietta gives her sister a DNA testing kit. And when the results of Lily's DNA test come back, they trigger a very unexpected response from a cold case detective. And what Lily's revealed in her test turns out to be the solution to a cold case 25 years old. So to me, it was I was just inspired by, like I say, by all those stories, the Nicky Campbell stories of babies in baskets left on pub doorsteps and all those things. What happens to those people, and how families that get separated, and how they can be joined together again, and how they can be healed actually over a period of years.
I think it's such a wonderful premise, Erin, especially I'm currently in Cornwall.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm planning to go for a walk on the beach right after this.
I write a lot about the sea. I love the sea. Everything. I love the sea. I think it's a very soothing place. It's very dramatic. I think it makes a great background. But I also like it's kind of a motif, the idea of a small town. I think for crime fiction, they're perfect. Agatha Christie perfected that really, didn't she? But you have like a closed stage of your characters. They move in and out. They're there kind of captive for the detective to come and see. So I do like those small town dramas, and I think people identify with those too. I think they become identifiable. They're quite no, I wouldn't say they're cozy, but I do think small towns make perfect settings for crime novels.
Absolutely. There's currently no one around me in this tiny hamlet, and I completely identify with what you're saying, Erin.
I'm so jealous you're in Cornwall. How lovely. Are you getting inspiration there, Felicia?
Yes, I am, most definitely.
Yeah.
I've just come here for a few days to do some walking and foraging and hopefully some writing too.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about Future Perfect, Felicia, and what is special about this book to you?
So this book is partly set in the near future, in the year 2030. And my detective happens to be the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Christian Verger. And poor Christian has some problems on his hands. Firstly, his voice assistant, Alexa, by then is very smart. So she tells him that there's a 99.74% chance he's going to die tomorrow, which is seriously alarming for poor Christian. Secondly, his fiancée, Viola, has left him. So he's got to win her back. And that doesn't help that he may die soon. And thirdly, there's this bomb which has just gone off on a fashion show in Manhattan. And there's a chance the murderer might strike again at the next show in London. So he's got a lot on his hands, and he's got to solve his case fast because he literally has a ticking clock.
I read somewhere that you feel that there should be a ticking clock in every crime novel. Is that what you said? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that they provide lots of interest to stories and also gives the reader hopefully a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
And from the point of view of the characters, they've got to work fast too.
Yeah.
So, and from the point of view of the writer, it makes things more interesting. So
I agree. Yeah. It keeps that tension there, doesn't it? Would you feel able to maybe read a little bit of your books to us? Would that be possible?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I was planning to read it on the second screen, but it has just gone silent. I'm so sorry.
Oh gosh, it's all right. It's okay.
Okay, here we go. So I'm starting from page 3, where the model has just been handed a bag before she goes on the catwalk. And I'll start from that point. I step up, still grimacing at the weight of the bag. Tick-tock. I jump. What on earth is that noise? I strain my ears, but I can only hear the lead singer belting into the microphone, followed by a cacophony of drum rolls and yet another roar of applause from the crowd. Did I imagine it? Was I imagining it? Was it part of the infectious tune blasting from the speakers? 10 seconds. I heard something, I say, turning blindly in the direction of the voice. It sounded weird. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Move. I can't. I feel my chest constricting, something pinning me down. It's the leaden weight of fear. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Oh God, says the voice. Move it, girl. Someone prods me hard on my right shoulder. I stumble forward through the curtains, onto the catwalk, and into a blinding pool of light. I blink, momentarily disorientated. A stream of red lights dissipates into the darkness ahead. On the left, almost like an airport landing strip. The lead singer is still crooning away into the microphone. The audience is erupting again with wild cheers. Yikes, 1,000 pairs of eyes are staring at me. Focus, a voice in my head screams. You've got to focus. Keep breathing. I take a deep breath, pull my spine up my shoulders back, start gliding down the runway. Tick-tock. I halt for a couple of seconds, prompting a ripple of astonished twitters from the crowd. Oh no, I'm losing it. I need to concentrate. Keep breathing, keep walking, keep pulling my lips together in a sexy pout. I take another deep breath, step forward again. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Shit, I swear the sound isn't from the loudspeakers. I think it's coming from the bag I'm carrying. What hell? Tick-tock, tick-tock. White-hot terror strikes my heart. I freeze. I hear alarm murmurs rippling through the audience. I should be moving ahead, gliding serenely. But I can't. I'm reduced to a petrified statue, one draped in the color of fear. Two thoughts rush to my head in a dizzying blur. One, there's 1,000 people in this space, and they're all going to die. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. The second is this. I'm going to die too. So,
Wow, what a cliffhanger. And certainly the ticking clock was very much there, wasn't it?
Definitely, I can hear it.
Good. Thank you very much, Felicia. Erin, would you be able to read us a little bit of yours?
Yes, of course. This is interesting enough, Felicia. I do have a ticking clock in my book also. Isn't that interesting? Different. It's on the mantelpiece in an old cottage in Cornwall, my book. So I do agree with you about clocks, actually. I do think they should be everywhere in crime books. Anyway, this is Missing, and this is the beginning of chapter 1. Ash grey on white, a herring gull drifts against the clear June sky. Alice lies back in her deck chair, letting the bird bring to mind music long not thought of, not heard for years, the dreamy, chilled melody of Fleetwood Mac's Albatross. The guitar rings in her head, the background score to childhood memories of watching Top of the Pops in that cramped, unhappy house, her father oozing disapproval of long hair and loose morals from behind his evening paper, her mother darning his socks, bravely defiant and tapping her foot to the song she liked. The gull wheels away out over the sea, which is for once the ultramarine blue of Enid Blyton's storybook summers, a once-upon-a-time background for shrimping nets and sandcastles, for jam sandwich picnics and thermos flasks of lukewarm tea. A boy runs excitedly up the beach, a plastic bucket full of seawater slopping over his naked legs. A teenage girl throws a ball for an overexcited dog. As his grandkids bury his feet in a hole in the sand, an old man smilingly rolls up his trousers to his knees. She glances at her watch. 3:15 p.m. 20 minutes past high tide. God knows there's no hurry. For a while longer she sits on, feeling the sun on her forearms, pulling up the hem of her sundress to expose her thighs to the heat. The days when she had legs men would drool over are long gone. Now she can't even imagine how it would feel to be admired, pursued, desired. The water is retreating, leaving the glistening sand studded with pebbles and pearly shells. As the exposed beach grows wider, Alice watches pools emerge at the base of the groin. In similar pools, she used to paddle after scuttling crabs and, with Grandpa's guidance, hunt for razor clams. She has a mark in mind. When the sea falls back level with the fourth seaweed-covered post, it will be time. Getting up from the deck chair, she packs away her picnic. When the cooler bag is zipped, removes the watch from her wrist. A wedding day gift from Rob, always treasured and cared for, and she touches its face to her lips before placing it on the chair's striped fabric. Pulling her black sundress over her head, she folds it and lays it over the watch. Removing her glasses, she folds them and lies them on top of her sundress. Over and over, a voice in her head whispers, "Why not go home?" But home has become a nest of insoluble problems. Home is no haven, but a snare.
Wow. What an ending as well. I'm so intrigued. Yeah. I like how you get inside her thoughts, and there's so many sort of avenues and doorways set up that we want to go through. So And I think that's one of the things a good crime novel always does. It sets up these wonderful questions in the reader's mind that, you know, need to be solved by reading the rest. I wonder if we could just talk a little bit then, given that you are both at different stages of your career, and we've talked a little bit about the fact that you like to travel a lot, Felicia, whereas Erin, you're quite happy being cocooned in your own space. Can you tell us a little bit about your writing day?
Well, for me, I've realized that I do write better in the mornings. So I try to squeeze in as much as I can when I'm still fresh, especially before lunch, upon which, you know, I'm a bit of a comatose person after that. So I just know that mornings work. The question is which mornings, and more often than not, the places which I tend to visit, I sort of make space for myself to write in the mornings and then go exploring in the afternoons. So it's about seizing each day, because there are some days where I can't write in the mornings. So it's all about, you know, finding time. Maybe during journeys, I find actually train journeys and plane journeys to be paradoxically quite interesting places for writing too. It's all about the change of view that matters sometimes, not just the view. So it's about seizing each time as it comes and using the best of it.
So do you write full time then?
For the moment, yes.
And do you tend to write longhand? Because I've heard some authors now write longhand, and it's more stimulating for maybe first drafts. Are you straight into the computer sort of person?
Straight into the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to write longhand, but that's very many years ago, and I've just got accustomed to the ease of which the delete button can be used on screens and computers.
What about notebooks or anything? Do you keep notebooks to sort of keep ideas coming, or is it all in your head?
These days, I've actually learned to make short recordings on my phone and speaking straight into it whenever I have an idea. That's usually more efficient than carrying a notebook and trying to scribble down something, especially when you're on the move. Yeah.
What about you, Erin? Do you have this set routine, or are you more of a night person or a morning person with writing? What's your routine look
like Felicia, I'm definitely a morning person. I write longhand. I always have written longhand. I have fountain pens. I love fountain pens. And I have a range of different coloured inks. I've got violets and turquoises and greens and blue. Yeah, and my mood, I choose a coloured ink depending on my mood for the morning. And I have beautiful notebooks. I'm always on the lookout for beautiful notebooks. And I always write my first drafts longhand because for me, I think the subconscious connects better to the paper. There's something about the movement of the pen nib on the paper which I find it just seems to be a better connection between my subconscious. And then I use I key those into a laptop, and I use that as my first edit, basically. You know, I edit quite happily after that point. And I write until about lunchtime, and then I tend to take the dogs for a walk because like I said, I'm big on solitude and I'm big on silence for writing. And I do a lot of thinking when I'm out walking with the dogs by myself, out in the countryside. That I find very, very stimulating. And I find that I have my best ideas, ironically, when I'm doing something totally banal. And that's usually something like peeling potatoes or doing the washing up.
Yeah.
Great
What is that?
points. I don't know why that is. I've no idea why
I get that too.
Yeah, it's just
bizarre.
You can just be there with your potato peeler and suddenly think, yeah, that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, I swear that's the case with me. I sort of marvel at how many times doing the dishes can just unravel something quite perplexing. They need to do research into this, I tell you.
It's got to be something to do with switching off part of your front brain, hasn't it? I think
it must be.
But it just always works a charm. Yeah.
Weird. So interesting.
Well, when I get stuck, I do go for a walk to untangle the snarl on my head.
Yeah,
I find that quite useful too.
Yeah, I remember Stephen King in his book on writing. He talks about walking. He walks, I think it's 5 miles a day or something like that. And he was on a walk when he got hit by a car. But yeah, I think that sort of slow pace, and just, you were talking earlier about your senses as well, Felicia, and I think just being out in the air and you know, the quiet as well can kind of, I don't know, help you tap into your thoughts a bit more. Do you both have certain word counts that you need to achieve every day or not?
No, I don't do that. I think that is, I mean, I like to hit a minimum of 1,000. I mean, 1,000 is it's not a lot, is it really, for a first stuff? But I think it's enough. And I think beating yourself up because you haven't written 1,000 words in a day, I think that's just counterproductive. Some days things are going on and you're just not in it. And I think if you're feeling like that, just walk away from it and come back tomorrow. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I really don't.
Yeah, I think it's the quality of the words that matter, not the quantity. And sometimes it's even more productive to delete 1,000 words than to actually write them.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
So I think we shouldn't beat ourselves up as writers to fulfill quotas or targets, because it's the process that matters. And if the process isn't enjoyable, we really shouldn't be doing it. But if we enjoy the process of writing and sort of challenging ourselves with questions, ideas on a daily basis, that's what truly keeps us writers going.
Yeah. I'm going to come to the audience in a moment. So do prepare any questions and put them in the Q&A or the chat. I can come to those and I can ask them on your behalf. If you can all see the chat and the Q&A just there. But I wondered if I could ask you, Erin, in terms of how your career has changed, have you, because I know you write under, well, this is a pseudonym, but have you changed genre at all? Because you do something very interesting with the crime genre. Have you ever been tempted to kind of go off in different directions, or is it, what are your thoughts on genre?
I think the first series of books that I wrote were genre bending, actually. There was a touch of magic in there and a touch of mythology, which was at the time was pretty unusual. And I found that really fun. It was quite subtle because you wouldn't say they were fantasy books and you could read them as straight novels, but if you had a bit more imagination, a bit more switched on, you might be thinking there was something a bit special going on. And I like to think that with as Erin Kinsley, I'm sort of genre bending a bit too, because these are family dramas, but there's definitely a huge crime element to them. And I think the market's very ready for that, actually. I mean, my advice to any writer would be, you need to write to the market, because otherwise, you've got to be in the business to sell books. But I think the appetite at the moment, especially after COVID and all this horrible mess that we've been through, is for gentler books somehow. I think people are looking for something gentler and kinder, a bit softer and a bit more emotional. And that's why, for me, it's as much the effect of crime on people as the actual crime itself. That's so interesting. It's it's not soft family drama. I'm not writing Barbara Taylor Bradford or anything like that, but I do think people are interested in emotions, in family ties, in love, and those wonderful things that bind us to our children. People are feeling that you've forced to have been closer to your children, aren't you, the past year, whether you've wanted to or
Indeed.
not. And I know that's been tough for some people, but the dynamics of family, I just find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. I think it is interesting how crime is such a huge genre. It can accommodate so many different sort of stories. It's not even subgenres. It's just the different kinds of stories that are that you can make fit within that genre. What about you, Felicia?
Well, I absolutely agree that it's about the complex dynamics between humans.
Yeah.
In the aftermath of a crime, is definitely worth exploring for any writer. I think we actually have a question from the audience about adding tension and suspense to novels.
That's right, yeah.
Yes. I think that's a really good question. For me, personally, I think that tension and suspense happens largely because of the withholding of information until the right moment. So it's about drip feeding important information to the reader at very strategic places. And it's really for the writer to figure out where these places are and how a novel should be populated with these emotions which Erin have been speaking about, and just facts about a certain crime that has happened, how to put them in a logical and coherent order in the story. And I think that a key element really is this withholding of information. But at the same time, it's about the secrets which characters discover, not just about others, but about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So again, finding strategic moments in the story to reveal the secrets to the reader. So that I find for me works when I'm writing.
How do you do that though? Because you said you don't plan your novels. Is that correct?
Well, I do plan when I'm in Germany, but otherwise I tend to go with the flow. And it's more about instinctive understanding of when the right time is. I just go with my instincts and trust them completely. And I actually personally think that the best mysteries and thrillers take readers by surprise, but they also take writers by surprise too.
Yeah.
But there are moments when I'm pleasantly surprised by what my characters have done. Or they themselves have actually done something in the story which I would not have expected, but makes great sense. So when you're actually following the route, the natural path taken by the characters, it often actually pans out pretty well in the end.
Oh, that's good. What about you, Erin? We have another question here about do you have a plan or framework for your novel, or do the characters you develop take the story along a path part of the time? Are you a planner or a pantser?
I am never a planner, and that has bitten me in the bum on one occasion when the plot really didn't hang together. But I always start from an idea, and I think I agree entirely with what Felicia's just said. I think it would be quite boring. It would, for me anyway, it would be quite boring to start a novel and know who done it. So I never know who's done it until the end, or getting close to the end, about 40, 50,000 words in. Then I start to know who's done it, and you can start to tie it all together. But I like to be surprised. If you let the story guide you, again, perhaps this is just an experience thing, and having the courage of your convictions and knowing that your subconscious, if you let it and if you give it enough space, will lead the story. But I think you get better stories that way. If you write to a formula, if you come up on one day with a storyline and you stick to that and you're not fluid with that and you won't deviate from that, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I think you're doing your writing a disservice, and you're doing the readers a disservice, because the story should be alive and should grow. And tendrils go everywhere and introduce complexities and introduce new characters you didn't even know were going to be in there. If you've got a character list on day one, what about this interesting character who's going to walk in the door in 6 months' time? Are you going to tell them they have to go away because there's no place for them in a novel? I would never do that. But that's me. Some people are not comfortable with that. I know.
I think you've probably given a lot of confidence to anyone who is thinking about writing a novel and maybe isn't a planner. Because it is quite daring to go in there and because I think you can set up a lot of things. It's then that 2/3 of the way through pulling it all together and making sure it all sort of comes together neatly, or at least in some sort of fashion.
It's really about flexibility and being very accommodating, both to your characters and to yourself as a writer.
Does that require a lot of editing then? Can I ask about the editing process? Because you said, Erin, before that you do a lot of editing.
Yeah, I do. I do a lot of polishing. I probably, from my first handwritten version of the book, I probably go through it at least 10 times after that. I polish, right up until the very last minute, because every word has got to earn its place. There's nothing worse than boring your readers with words that don't need to be there. I mean, to me, the absolute art of good writing is using one adjective that tells a whole story for, that makes a sentence, makes a paragraph, just to give your reader the feel of where they are, what the character's thinking is. And that's what editing is for. It's about polishing, but it's about cutting. Lengthy descriptions, not hugely popular in my books. I don't want those in there. I'm looking for pace. Looking to move the story on, like Felicia just said. You want your cliffhangers at the end of every chapter. They're not ponderous. Mine are not ponderous books. They're speedy reads that will draw people on. And I think that's the importance of editing. If there's a paragraph in there that hasn't earned its place, I'm sorry, it's got to go. And it's heartbreaking though that is.
What about characters? Have you ever done any sort of deeper structural editing like that? Is it most of the editing's mostly language at that kind of level, or is there anything deeper like characters or
No, I
structure or
think
anything like that?
sometimes there's you want to deepen the character's backstory. You can you want to make the characters empathetic. That's the thing. They've got to be the readers need to identify with them, and you can increase that joint feeling by letting your readers know more about the characters and letting them learn more about the characters. So yeah, quite often I will add details about the characters, perhaps rather than take them away. So perhaps reduce description and deepen your character. You know how deep your characters are.
Really good. What about you, Felicia? What's your editing process like? And then I've got a couple of
Intensive.
questions from the audience. Sorry?
Yeah, really intensive process. I think I did at least 14 edits minimum.
Wow.
For both novels. As Erin said, every word has to earn its place. Every word has been thought over multiple times, whether or not they should be there or not. For me, I realized that characters in particular only truly come alive after multiple edits. Yeah. That's when you really see who they are at their core. It's about having the patience really and the desire to keep going. That's what drives me with my stories, that it's, sooner or later there will come a point when I have to abandon it, the story. Novels are never truly finished, I believe. They're just abandoned by their writers. But up to that point, I'm going to do every single thing in my power to actually do the best which I can with that story.
Oh, excellent. Well, we've got a couple of questions, or 3 questions I can see from the audience. So I'll begin with a question from Sue Hill. Do you have a preference of writing in first or third person, and why?
Shall I go first?
Yes.
I've never written anything in first person, I have to be honest. I do write in present tense, and I think that's quite a fashionable thing, present tense versus past tense. I used to write in past tense. Now I prefer present tense, but I've never quite dared tackle first person, just because I think it would be quite difficult just with that single viewpoint. I think you've got to have a very strong narrative to maintain it from one person's viewpoint. I think that would be difficult. If you had 2 first person viewpoints, yeah, I might see that, but not for me. I think third person is far easier. I just think with first person you're making it difficult for yourself, actually. But
it's really difficult to write in first person. My first book has 4 first person perspectives, and my second book has another 4. So at some point I was having 8 voices in my head, all in first person.
Oh my gosh.
And it was really difficult to make them different. I assure you, it was such a crazy process, but it's fun. And I like writing first person because I can go very deep into the interior thoughts of each character.
I think everyone leans one way or the other. I had to train myself to write in third person because first person's a more natural kind of, I don't know, it just comes out that way. So that's really interesting. I think there's pros and cons for both, isn't there? And Amy has asked, how long does it take you to write a novel? And thank you for this discussion, she says. How long does it take you to write a novel, Erin?
Well, I get a year, so that's my contract, and usually I start in about month 3, which is so I get about 9 months, and wish I'd started 3 months previously. But I think with practice you can write faster, and also when you've got a deadline like that, it's amazing how it focuses your attention, especially when it gets to month 7 and you've still got 30,000 words. That kind of speed up. So it's one of those things, isn't it? Any task will fill the time available. So if you've only got 6 months, you could probably write a book in 6 months. But I think a year is a good length of time to write a book.
Yeah. What about you, Felicia?
For me, the first book took 15 months. And the second book, more or less the same, but I think the editing was, more than 2 years in the end, in total, working with my a structural editor. So it's a long process. And I think I see a question about how long do you leave between edits? It's a really good one, thank you. For me, I think what's really important is to leave space between edits. So I do go away at least for 1 week between each edit and just let that manuscript percolate and just sit there for a while, not touch it, do something else, and to come back with it with a fresh head. That really helps. So that I usually get this break when I send my manuscript out to beta readers. For both manuscripts, I send it to about 10 people. So as I wait for their comments to come back, I usually get a few weeks in between edits. And that really helps me to clear my thoughts about the novel and see it afresh when I come back to it.
Wow, 10 beta readers. That's amazing. I have a whole list of questions now about how you integrate feedback. Can I ask you, Erin, do you use beta readers, or how does it work with you? Do you send it to your agent and editor?
I don't have beta readers apart from my very patient other half, who always has a first read and usually says, yes, it's very nice, dear, like they do. It's not very much, not very much help, is it? But then mine just goes straight off to my editor. So that's it. I don't do the beta reader thing. The editing thing, what I would say about the space of time between edits, I would say absolutely the longer the better. And if you're writing something that isn't immediately required, try leaving it for a year or more and seeing what you think when you come back to something after a year or more, or even 5 years. And you'll see where your mind was at then, but you'll see some real nuggets. And if with a bit of luck, you'll be looking at stuff and you're thinking, wow, did I write that? And that's the moment that okay, you think you had written something of value back then, and going back to something after a long period of time, I think is really interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah. Maybe, if it gets published, you might regret it, in other words. Do we have any last we do, with a few more. Alison has asked, what do you do between books to relax? That's a good question.
Well, I garden and I read. I like growing vegetables. That's my big thing. So I grow a lot of veggies and walk dogs. But a very boring, quiet life these days.
That sounds idyllic.
Well,
growing veggies and walking dogs. It sounds very healthy.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
What about you? What about you, Felicia?
I go long trips. I love scuba diving.
Wow.
I discovered recently that Ian Fleming was a big scuba diver himself. And he used to write in between his dives. So I do travel in between books and just reset my understanding of the world.
Where's the most interesting place you've ever scuba dived?
Well, Bermuda with its wrecks was very interesting.
Wow.
And I've also done some amazing caves in Mexico on the Yucatan Peninsula, where you dive through layers of sulfuric acid.
Yeah.
Where really scary. You can't see anything. And you can see petrified trees growing out from this layers of sulfur.
Oh my gosh. I expect to see that in a future book. And we have a question from Amy. Any tips on how to handle sensitive subject matter when writing a book, for example, eating disorders or sexual assault?
Oh, well, shall I answer that? Because my first book, as Erin found, was about child abduction and abuse. Yeah. So that was quite a hard one. And the short answer is I put in no details whatsoever. And just left it to the reader's imagination. What was interesting to me about that is that I did get mail from people saying I should have put in the details. Can you believe that? I just thought, no, that's not my style. I think you have to, it's the art of suggestion. You're talking about something really, really awful, so awful that I personally don't want to put it into words, but you still want to look at the victim's experience. And I think you have to put it into the emotion and perhaps other characters' reaction to it, and do it that way. But it's difficult. But I would just never put in the detail. It's all in the emotion and the character's reaction to it.
Yeah. I touched briefly on that in Future Perfect, sexual abuse. And again, it's all about the aftermath the following day, the emotions which my character goes through. So the details of what actually happened are not in the book, but aftermath of it, how the character tries to deal with that is covered in depth.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you very much for this discussion. That hour has flown in. It has been a really, really enjoyable session, and thank you to our audience for the questions. I've put a little link in the chat box where you can go, if you haven't already, and purchase the books. But I'd really like to extend a warm thanks to you both, Erin and Felicia, for this very generous conversation. So thank you, and I hope you have a really good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.
Thanks. Okay, take